Hello artists, I hope you're ready to do some one-point perspective drawing with me. Today we're going to be going through our practice for one-point perspective. So I have a few things here set up to help me with that today. The first is my Unit 2 packet. So in this packet, I not only have reminders about what our goals are for this unit, especially the project requirements, so what I'm going to have in my drawing, but I also have a page here that will show me visual examples of one-point perspective steps. And the last page, we have the steps that we're going to follow to make sure that as we add things, we make enough room to meet the project requirements that are listed here on the first page. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up to the last page of our packet so that we can use these steps to help us in our drawing. So I have my packet open to the last page, step 6, practice drawing. I have a piece of blank paper out, a pencil, and a ruler. So if you don't have a ruler, you're going to find something either in your binder or at home that you can use that has a straight edge to make your lines. If you don't use a ruler with one-point perspective, we are going to get something that does not look like it goes back in space properly. So it's really important that you have a ruler or a straight edge. So what I'm going to do today is add as much to my practice drawing as I can following these steps. And as I go, I want to think about what might I decide to do in my summative artwork that might help me when I'm practicing. So today you can practice drawing either with your paper vertical or horizontal. It does not matter which way your paper goes for this project. So for this video, I'm going to keep my paper vertical. And then next time you practice, maybe you try horizontal. That's going to be a choice you make later on in this unit. So let's get started. I want to remember as I draw to draw lightly with my pencil. We do a lot of erasing with one-point perspective, so you want to make sure you're drawing light from the beginning. Number 1 says I'm going to draw my horizon line. I would suggest drawing your horizon line somewhere near the middle of your paper or a little bit higher. If we draw it too low, it doesn't give us a lot of space to put all of the buildings and all of the extras and fun stuff that we want to fill our street view drawing with. So I'm going to move my ruler so it's a little bit higher up on the page. I want to make sure it's actually straight. If I draw my horizontal line crooked, it's again going to throw off my one-point perspective look. So what I do is I use the side of the ruler to make sure it's actually lined up with the side of my paper. I'm going to draw a light line across the paper. I'm going to start pressing a little bit harder with my pencil so that I can make sure it's very clear in my video what I've just drawn there. Okay, so I need to erase a little bit. I went over one of my lines. Okay, so number 2 says our vanishing point. For our practice, we're going to draw our vanishing point, which is a dot on the horizon line, towards the center of our horizon line. You can do one-point perspective with it drawn off to the sides, but that might be a little bit more advanced. So if you've done that before, you're welcome to do that on your summative work. Number 3 is our street and sidewalk. So I want my street to start at the vanishing point and get bigger as it comes towards me. So I'm going to use a diagonal line. So I'm going to turn my ruler so that it is touching the vanishing point. And I get to decide how wide the street is. If I make it too narrow, it might look too small. If I make it too wide, I don't have as much space over here for building. So at least for practice, I'm gonna go somewhere in the middle. So I'm leaving some space over here in the corner, but it's still gonna be wide enough here. So I'm gonna start with my pencil on the vanishing point, and I'm gonna draw a diagonal line right off the paper. Okay, so here's my first diagonal line starting at the vanishing point, going off the paper. Then I need to make the other side of my street. So I'm going to try and make this look even, the same amount of white space on both sides, but if it's not perfect, I know this is just my practice, so I'll get better as I go. Drawing a line from the vanishing point off the page. So now it looks like my street is bigger towards me and gets smaller as it goes back in space. The next part of that step says street and sidewalk. You only have to have one sidewalk on your summative drawing. Today we're gonna practice putting them on both sides so that you know how that looks. So you get to choose later if you only have one or if you do two. So I'm gonna do the same step as before. I'm drawing a diagonal line from the vanishing point off the paper. But right now, what I'm gonna do is think about how much of a gap I want to leave for my sidewalk. Okay, if they're really big, again, I'm losing space for my buildings. If they're really small, it might look more like a gutter along the side of the street. It might not look quite like a sidewalk. So I'm gonna use my best judgment right now. And I'm gonna line it up so it's touching the vanishing point. My pencil is gonna start at the vanishing point and go off the page. All right, so here's my sidewalk. Starts bigger towards me and gets smaller as it goes back in space. I'm going to do that same thing on the other side. So I'm gonna try and get this gap to look even. I'm gonna start with my pencil on the vanishing point and draw off the page. Now, to make my street and sidewalk look a little bit more realistic, we have some options to add. The first would be the lines that go down the center of the road. So you could draw solid lines, or we can draw dashed lines. So dashed lines are a little bit more complicated. That's what I'm gonna show you today. So I'm gonna line my ruler up with my vanishing point. I'm gonna make sure it's straight up and down. So to help me with that, if I want to make sure it's straight, I could line the bottom edge of my ruler up with my paper, make sure it's touching the vanishing point, and then I know it's going straight up and down. It's a vertical line right now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make longer lines towards the front of the street, and they're gonna get shorter as they go back. So you can watch and see what that looks like when I'm done. So a long line, and then they're gonna start to get shorter, and this just takes some eyeballing and practice. So if it doesn't turn out perfect, you can adjust your lines by just erasing them a little bit or adding more to them. So again, they're starting longer and then they get shorter as they move away. So you can go ahead and try that step. Then what I want to do is also make my sidewalk look more realistic. So if we take a look at the sidewalks we see around us every day, there are cracks in a lot of sidewalks. So what we're going to do is use horizontal lines. So we want to make sure all of the lines we draw right now are horizontal. And we're gonna start towards the front of our sidewalks. The gaps in between are gonna be bigger up front, and they're gonna also get smaller as they go back, just like the dashed lines on the street. So I'm gonna make sure my ruler is horizontal. Again, this just takes some guessing the first couple times you do this to see how big you really need to make these spots. So I'm gonna make sure my ruler is lined up with the edge of my paper. It's actually vertical. I'm gonna make a line on both sides of the sidewalk, and then I'm gonna scoot that back. Okay, I'm gonna try and make about the same size space and a line on both sides and scoot my ruler back. Now what I see happen sometimes is students start to get slanted with the ruler as they go. So we always wanna make sure as we push the ruler back, we keep it horizontal and we make lines on both sides. So at this time, you can pause the video if you need to and try your best to create the lines in the sidewalk. So we would keep going here until you get all the way back in space. For the sake of this video, I'm just gonna keep going, but your lines would continue all the way back to your vanishing point. All right, so you should have lines that go all the way back. All right, we're ready for the next step, which is number 4. In our packet, it says buildings. So the notes down here are gonna help us make sure we're doing our buildings correctly. I'm gonna start with one building on this side of the paper, and then later we can do a building on this side. So it's up to you what side you want to do, but it's gonna be easier to follow the video if you do your buildings on the left side first. So we wanna start with a rectangle or a square. So I'm gonna decide where my building is gonna go. I'm gonna start at the sidewalk, draw a line up, over, down, and back to create that rectangle or square shape. We're gonna start with a building that's shorter first. We're gonna do a building that is underneath the horizon line, and then we can do a taller building behind it. So I'm going to do this step and then you can pause it and try it yourself. So I'm gonna start with my ruler touching my sidewalk. So let's see. I'm gonna draw a line from the sidewalk and draw a straight line up so that it does not touch the vanishing point. So it's not quite touching the vanishing point. So again, I'm gonna repeat that one more time. I start at the sidewalk, with my pencil here, my ruler is vertical, and I drew a straight line up, and then I stopped before I would hit the horizon line. Then I'm gonna draw a line over, away from the street. This is where I see students make a lot of mistakes. They go towards the street and they can't quite fit their whole rectangle shape. They would run into the sidewalk or the road. So what we're gonna get in the habit of doing is when we do a building, we draw straight up and then away from the street. So I'm gonna draw a horizontal line, making sure my ruler is straight. And I'm gonna draw a line over, not quite off the page. If you go off the page, that's fine. Then I'm gonna draw a straight vertical line down, right? I'm making a rectangle or a square shape. Okay. Then I'm going to draw another horizontal line to close my rectangle. So I went up, over, down, and back to the sidewalk. I have a little bit of extra line here. I can erase that. I have a little bit of a mistake here, but I can do that better on my summative. So this is our rectangular square that we start our building with. The next step says, then draw receding lines that go back to the vanishing point, or the VP, like it says in your packet. So what we're gonna be doing is making our building look like it goes back in space, just like our street goes back in space. So what we're gonna do is draw receding lines, which are diagonal lines that go back to the vanishing point. So I'm going to line my ruler up with the front corner of my building here and my vanishing point. So I'm going to start with my pencil at the front corner of the building and draw back to the vanishing point. And now I have my first receding line from the front corner of the building back to, and it touches the vanishing point. All right, then I'm going to do that again with the second corner of the building here. I'm going to draw a line from this corner back to the vanishing point. So I'm lining it up so it touches the front corner, drawing a line back to the vanishing point. So I have my second receding line. Now it looks like I have this building that's super long and goes all the way back to the vanishing point, which is great. But when we know for this project we need 8 or more buildings, that's going to take up a lot of our space. So when we're at this point, what we want to do is find a space to actually end our building so it doesn't continue to go all the way back. So what I'm gonna do is line my ruler up with the edge of my building so it's a vertical line. I'm going to slide my ruler back, and this is where I get to decide how much of the building do I want to be able to see here. Is it going to be a really long building? Is it going to be shorter? I'm going to go somewhere in the middle there. I think this is good. I want to make sure my ruler is actually vertical, and I'm going to draw a vertical line like that. Then what I need to do is if the front of my building, so this is the front of the building that'll be on the sidewalk, so you can imagine if you're walking down the street and you wanted to go into a building, this is how you would turn in. This is the front of the building. Then I also need to end the rooftop, right? The roof can't continue to go back in space if the front of the building doesn't. So I'm going to do that same kind of step where I start with my ruler lined up with this front horizontal line, and I'm going to slide it back and draw a horizontal line to end my building here. Then what I could do is I could erase these two receding lines. I can erase them so that I have one building standing alone, but I also want to show you another option really quick. So I'm just going to draw light, and you can practice this too, and then we'll actually erase what we do. So if I wanted to draw two buildings that are touching each other and they happen right after each other, I'm going to use this line here for my next step. So this could be an example of like a mall where all the buildings are right next to each other and they're the same shape and size. That could be something you use this technique for. So again, I'm going to take my ruler, line it up with this vertical line that I have with my building already, and I'm just going to slide my ruler back, and again I'm going to decide how much of that building do I want to be able to see. So I'm going to draw a vertical line, and now I have two buildings next to each other, right? So I could walk down the street and go shopping in this building, and then I could continue and go into this building, but I also need to end the rooftop, right? Just like we did with our first building. So I'm going to start with this horizontal line here. I'm going to line my ruler up, and I'm going to slide my ruler back until it touches the corner of the line that I just drew. So now I have two rooftops as well and two front of the building. Now I can erase the receding lines in the back, and it looks like these two buildings are standing all by themselves. Now what you might see in my video is still those receding lines because I'm pressing harder with my pencil so it shows up very clearly in the video. But you want to practice drawing light because we do a lot of erasing with 1-point perspective. So if that is something you're struggling with now, we want to practice drawing light. Before we start doing buildings behind and taller buildings behind shorter buildings and overlapping things, we're going to try this idea on the other side of our road so that we can take what we've learned so far and try it on the right side. What we're going to do is create a building that is taller on this side so that we get practice with a different type of building. So we're going to go back to our notes for buildings again. It says start with a rectangle or square. So since I'm going to do a tall building, it's most likely going to be a rectangle. So I'm going to start kind of somewhere around here on my sidewalk because I started a little bit further back last time. So I'm going to start closer up front, and I want to make sure my ruler is going vertical, straight up and down. So it's lined up with my paper. And I'm going to draw a line that starts at the sidewalk, and I'm going to go all the way up. And I get to decide how tall do I want, how tall do I want this building to be. I'm gonna line my ruler up and fix that line. Okay, so again, I have my ruler going vertical. I started at the sidewalk here and drew a straight line up past the horizon line, and I decided it's gonna stop there. Now what we're gonna do is also practice drawing a building that goes off the page. So this building here, you can see this whole side. We're gonna try one that looks like it's going off the page. So I'm drawing a rectangle, so I went up, and then I wanna go over because we go away from the street. Remember, we do not go towards it because we would run into our street and sidewalk with our rectangle. So we draw a straight line up and over, right off the page. And if that doesn't work out so well for your piece of practice paper, you could do it like we did here before, but we want to know that this is an option where it goes off the page. So I have to imagine that my building ends somewhere over here. So my line comes down, and then it's going to come back over to connect to make my rectangle. When we think about how buildings are made, and if we would take a picture of a street, we probably wouldn't get everything just in the picture. Things are going to go outside of that range. So this is a little bit more realistic, having things that go off the page. I do have an issue that's popping up though, right? My horizon line is now showing through my building. So I want to erase this part of the horizon line. And again, I'm drawing dark for my video. You should not be able to really see that anymore because you're practicing drawing really light. All right, so this part is done here with the rectangle. It says that then draw receding lines that go back to the vanishing point. So when we did that here, that's what makes it look like our buildings are going back in space. But here's the difference. We're doing a tall building now. It goes past the horizon line. So we will not be able to see the rooftop. So it's gonna look a little bit different. So we're still gonna draw receding lines that go back to the vanishing point. So I'm gonna draw a receding line from the front corner of my building to the vanishing point. This is where I'm gonna line my ruler up. So I'm going to line my ruler up from the front corner of the building to the vanishing point, and I'm going to draw a line from the front corner of the building all the way back to the vanishing point. That is my receding line. That is what's making my building look like it's going all the way back here. Again, like we talked about before, if we leave our building like this, it's probably just going to take up too much space of our drawing. So we're going to end our building. So I always start with lining my ruler up so I can make sure, okay, I know it's vertical. And I'm going to slide it back, decide how big I want this building to be. I'm not going to make it too long because I want to draw some stuff in the background. So I think this is good. I'm going to draw a vertical line so that it goes down to the sidewalk and it goes up to the building. This is the vertical line that I just drew. All right, so what I want you to do now is erase this extra receding line. Erase that extra receding line first before we do anything else. That's the line that I just erased. Again, you're drawing light, so we shouldn't be able to see that. Now it looks like our building is standing on its own. But we have a little bit more horizon line that's peeking through, so we're going to erase that too. Now we have a three-dimensional building. Eventually, when we add color to these, they'll look more solid. For example, if this building is orange and this building is red, they're going to look more solid and separate. So right now it starts to look all the same since it's just a pencil sketch at the beginning of this project. What we're going to do now is go over windows and doors and a few signs and extras. Then we'll come back to buildings to do things that are overlapping. So if we're going to continue with windows and doors, I know that I need, from my packet, 8 or more windows and doors. So really, if we have 8 buildings, there should be 8 doors and at least 8 windows. So we're going to start with the easier side, or at least what I think is easier. When we add anything to the flat side of our buildings, so for example, this is a rectangle shape, anything I add here is also going to be flat. So I can draw a square door, I could draw a rectangular door, and that's going to work great in this space. So I'll do one here, and then you can try it yourself. Let's see if my door is over here. I get to decide, okay, how tall is my door going to be? And it's all kind of guessing the first couple times we practice. And then you can learn, oh, I need to make my door shorter. Maybe I need to make it wider. All of that comes with practice. So for right now, as long as you draw a rectangular door, you're good. Eventually, I could use my ruler to make things look a little bit more unique. Like if I wanted a border around the door. If I wanted to add a door handle, maybe it has windows. All of that depends on the type of building I want this to be. So that's going to be a few decisions you make in the future. What kind of buildings are here? Are they more homes or are they more businesses? And what kind of doors do we need to put in that space? So since this is kind of off nowhere, eventually I could extend my sidewalk too and make a path to the door. All of that comes later after a lot of practice. So if we have a door on this side, let's just put one on this side over here too. So I'm going to draw another rectangle, or maybe I'll switch this one up a little bit. I'm going to draw a taller door, and instead of a flat top to that door, maybe it's actually curved a little bit. So you want to think about how can you add different styles of doors and windows and signs and extras to make your drawing look a little bit more unique. So over time, we'll start to make those decisions. Maybe this is a push door. So I have like that area that you push to open it instead of a doorknob. So there's a lot of different things that we can add over time. So we have doors on this side. If we know that we can use like a regular rectangle, square, circle, any sort of shape on the rectangular sides of our buildings, that's going to apply to our windows too. So we're going to add, let's see, I'm going to do 2 windows on this side, okay, and then maybe 1 window over here. So I'm going to draw a rectangular window. Maybe it's going to be a little bit smaller of a window. Again, I'm always using my ruler. as I draw these in. Okay, let's see if I can make another one that's about the same size. We'll see if I can do that. Okay, oh, that's pretty good. So I can do any shape on this side of the building. This is a rectangular side of the building, so I can do squares, rectangles, circles, anything I want here. Eventually, maybe you want different styles of windows, maybe one like that. Maybe there's curtains hanging in one. All of that stuff will come later with more planning. So then if I want to make a really big window over here, maybe since it's a bigger building, I'm going to still do a rectangle or a square shape. And maybe that's a really large window for a big building. Okay, so we have the easier side done with windows and doors, but now we want to look at this other side of our building. So we're going to look at this building first. This building looks, this side of it is on the street, and the street goes back in space. Anything I add to this side of the building also needs to look like it goes back in space to the vanishing point. Right, so again, the way I always try and remember this is the side that's on the street goes back in space. So what I'm going to do is make a door first. And I'm going to start that door at the sidewalk, go up with 2 lines. So I'm just going to make the sides of my door. So if the side of my building is vertical, straight up and down, the sides of my door need to be vertical. So I'm going to draw 2 vertical lines. Don't worry about the height right now. You can erase any extra. 2 vertical lines are going straight up and down. They are vertical. This is where I see a lot of students tilt their ruler when really it should be a vertical line. Then what I need to do is draw the top of the door. If I use my building for reference, I can see that the top of the building is going back in space, right? It goes back to the vanishing point. That means the top of my door is going to have to go back in space to the vanishing point. So I'm going to line my ruler up with the vanishing point here, and then I'm going to decide where do I want the top of the door to be, and I want to make sure it's still lined up with the vanishing point. Okay, I'm going to draw my receding line here for the top of the door. So now it looks like this line goes back in space, but I only drew it where I needed it. So I'm going to go ahead and erase extra here. I can add more information to that door, like a handle or designs to it, maybe a signs on it. All of that I can add later on. So if I know that I need my door to look like it goes back in space, I'm also going to need any windows or signs to go back in space. So I'm going to draw 1 bigger window here. Again, if the side of my building is vertical, the side of my window will be vertical. So I'm going to draw a vertical line here. And again, don't worry about the length. We can erase anything that is too long. And a vertical line here. So I have the sides of my windows drawn here, 2 vertical lines straight up and down. Then I know for the top of my window, if the top of my building goes back to the vanishing point, the top of my window needs to go back to the vanishing point. So I'm going to line my ruler up with the vanishing point and decide where I want the top of my window to be here. I'm going to draw it here. So now I have a receding line for the top of my window. I need to connect that a little bit. And if the bottom of my building is a receding line that goes back to the vanishing point, so does the bottom of my window. So I'm going to line my ruler up with the vanishing point, and I'm just going to draw a line where I need it. Okay, I'm going to erase these extra parts of the window. The lines went too far on. And again, I could decorate this as I choose to later on. So this is the more difficult side because we need to make things look like they're receding and going back in space. So let's try that over here on this side. Things start to flip as we move from one side of the street to the other. So if I'm going to add a door to this side of my building and I know it's on the street and the street goes back in space, this door is going to look like it goes back in space. So the sides of my building are straight up and down. That means the side of my door is going to be straight up and down. So I'm going to draw from the sidewalk straight up. That's pretty tall. That's all right, I'll make a tall door. All right, I'm going to make another vertical line from the sidewalk straight up. And again, I'm just kind of guessing with the height. I can change that later. So I have 2 vertical lines that make the sides of my door. Then I know if the top of my building is a receding line that goes back to the vanishing point. so is the top of my door. So I'm gonna line my ruler up with the vanishing point, decide where I want the top of the door to be, make sure that doesn't move, and draw a short receding line that goes back to the vanishing point, but I only drew it where I needed it. Now I can erase any extra here. I could add fun elements to my door there later. If I'm gonna do this for my door, I would need to do that for a window or a sign or anything else added on top. So you can go ahead and practice that. Again, if the sides of my building are straight up and down, the sides of my window will be straight up and down. So I'm gonna draw, let's see, a vertical line straight up and down here and a vertical line here. Okay, I have 2 vertical lines. I'm not worried about the height right now. I can change them later. Then I know if the top of my building is a receding line, the top of my window will be a receding line. Okay, and then the bottom of my window will also be a receding line that touches the vanishing point. Okay, I have some extra line up here I need to erase, and then I could decorate that as I choose to. So right now we have some really basic buildings with some simple shapes. As we go throughout this project, we'll talk about how to add a lot of fun details to make this look more unique. But I wanna go through how to add signs and extras, and then we'll do some buildings in the background. So for signs and extras, we're gonna go over one of the more simple ways to make a sign. Then later, we'll watch a complex video where we can see more signs like billboards or 3-dimensional signs. So for signs, if I'm gonna make a sign on the rectangle or square side of my building, what kind of signs or shapes of signs do you think I can make? If my doors and windows are squares and rectangles, I can make a square rectangle sign, I can make a triangle sign, a circle sign, any shape on this side of my building here, or on this side of my building here, because those are the rectangle sides. So I already have a great start for a sign on this side. So if I drew a square and I wanted my sign to be a square, maybe if this is like a Nike store, so I want to draw like the Nike swoosh on the inside, you know, I could do that for my sign later on. I could do a circle sign, I could do a triangle, whatever shape you wanted. It's on this side again that things get a little bit harder. So I'd follow the same steps for making a window to do a sign. So I'd have 2 vertical lines and then receding lines for the top and bottom. So you can rewind this back to making our signs to review, or windows for how to review making a sign. The difficult part then is when I start to add words here, because they need to still look like they're going back in space. So what I do is I write my letters really thin and next to each other. So for example, if this is like an art supply store, so you definitely need those, I'd write my letters really thin so I can fit them all, and the longer word you have, the more planning it takes to make sure that those fit in there. The same thing would happen over on this side of your building. So we're following the rules of 1-point perspective for our signs. The last thing I want to talk about is extras before we start to add more buildings. So when we add extras, and I know that I need 4 or more extras, and there's a list of what extras could be down here, I want to think about 1-point perspective. So for example, if I have a tree that is really small here, and then another tree way back here that's super big, that perspective is a little bit off. We know that things are supposed to be bigger up front and smaller as they go back. So I'm going to erase these trees because they're not drawn correctly with 1-point perspective. And we're going to rethink that idea. So for example, if I wanted a bush next to this door, and okay, it's going to be about this big and this tall. If I draw one back here, it's probably going to be a little bit shorter. And as it goes back in space, well, maybe there's another bush there. It gets smaller and gets smaller. So whether you're drawing people or cars, or maybe there's a cat over here and a dog over there, we want to think about the size of them compared to the things that are happening around us. That's why it's great to add your extras more towards the end so that you know the perspective of things and how much space your buildings are going to take up first, and then you can add your extras later on. So we just want to consider perspective when we add our extras. At this point, if this is the first time you're watching this video per my instructions, you can stop here, take a picture of your work, and submit that to your Google Classroom assignment. If we've been continuing to work on our 1-point perspective for a while now, we want to know how to add more buildings to the background of our drawing. So things are going to overlap and start to look a little bit different. And again, we're going to be doing a lot of erasing, so draw light. So one thing that we can do is draw buildings that are touching and then buildings that have a gap in between them. So I'm going to draw a building over on this side that has a gap in between. So if this building ends right here on the sidewalk, see, I'm just going to draw a little dot so that there's a little bit of a gap in between the two buildings I'm drawing. So from this dot, I'm going to draw a straight line up, and this building's going to be taller, so I'm going to go past the horizon line. So I'm going to line my ruler up so that it's vertical, straight up and down. I'm going to start with my pencil at that dot that I made, and I'm going to draw a straight line up as tall as I want the building to be. I think that's good. So you're going to go past the horizon line. I know that when I make buildings, I'm starting with a rectangle or a square. So I know if I go up, I need to go over away from the street. Right? If I go towards the street, I'm going to run into my street and sidewalk. So I'm going to draw a horizontal line that goes away from my street. I went up and over. Now we have to go down and back. But I don't want to draw something that goes through my buildings. So I'm going to draw this line that goes down and stop when I get to the top, the rooftop of my building here. Okay, so I went up, over, down. Now I have to imagine that this line keeps going down and comes back over, and only draw that last horizontal line only where I can see it right here. Okay, then I need to erase any horizontal line that's showing through. Now I have my rectangle shape. Even though I can't see it all, I can imagine it goes behind this building. Next up is my receding lines that go back to the vanishing point. So I'm going to draw a line from the front of my building here, this corner, back to my vanishing point. Right? And since it's a taller building, I'm not going to be able to see the rooftop, just like we experienced over on this side. So I'm going to line my ruler up with the corner of the building and the vanishing point and draw a receding line back in space. Now again, I could do the same thing I did up here and have two buildings that are touching, or I could end my building and have one building in this background area. So I'm going to line my ruler up with this edge because I know, okay, if this edge is vertical, I need to slide my ruler back. Okay, I want my building to end here. I'm going to draw a vertical line straight up and down. Then I'm going to erase the horizon line that's cutting through my building and erase that extra receding line. Okay, so now it looks like this building is standing on its own, and once I color over it, it'll look even more three-dimensional and solid. So now we're going to try a building on this side, and we're going to make it shorter, and it's going to be touching this building. So if this is my rectangle or square of this building here, I can imagine that this building, if it starts at the sidewalk and goes up, the next part of my building is for that rectangle. It needs to go away from the building. So actually my rectangle shape or square shape is going to be completely hidden from this building because it's taller and it's going to be side by side. So if I'm doing a building that's side by side, I can skip that rectangle or square step, and I'm just going to do my receding line. This is where things get tricky and harder to understand, but the more we practice, the better we get. So I'm going to make my building go above the horizon line, right? So my ruler is at a diagonal angle going this way. I'm going to start at the building and draw a line right back to the vanishing point. this is going to be the side of the building that's on the street. Right now it goes all the way back in space. So I need to end my building. The front of it starts with a vertical line. I'm going to scoot this back. Okay, I want my building to be this wide. I'm going to draw a vertical line straight up and down. I can erase this horizontal line, and I can erase the extra receding line if I don't want to draw any more buildings back there. Okay, so we have an example that there's a gap in between and an example where they're right next to each other. I could start to add windows and doors there, but I know I need 8 buildings. So I could add a small one back here, and I could add 2 more over here, and I'd have 8. You can also add buildings to your background here and in the background here, but that just is a little bit more advanced, and I can work with you on that if you're willing to do that. So we have our basics for following our 1-point perspective. This is challenging, so you might need to rewatch this and try things multiple times. But just remember to use your ruler and draw light, and the more we practice, the better we get. So I hope that we can have a great experience with 1-point perspective. Bye, everyone.